Welcome to Single Parent Success Stories, a podcast designed to inspire single parents. Here you'll find resources from self-care to finances to parenting and everything in between. Discover what it takes to thrive. Let the stories inspire you to what is possible. Hello and welcome to Single Parent Success Stories. Today's guest is Debbie Weiss. She is the author of Available as Is and Midlife Widows Search for Love. Midlife Widows Search for Love. Her book is about creating a new life, including finding a voice after losing her husband and high school sweetheart of 32 years. She's a former lawyer and she's joining us from Northern California. And the reason why she's here today, because she grew up in a single parent household. Welcome, Debbie. It is a pleasure to have you.
Oh, thank you for having me, Irina.
Yes, thank you. So please share with us, how was your experience growing up in a single parent household? What were some of the challenges? First of all, start with how old you were when that happened, and then share your story.
Okay. Well, when I was 10, my mom died after a brief illness.
Sorry.
And that left me alone with my dad. I was an only child. And that was 1973. So that was a long time ago when dads didn't usually run households. My dad was a scientist and a very traditional kind of dad. We lived in suburban Northern California. So he had to take everything over. You know, we had a ranch house, with a big yard, kind of a suburban thing. And he had to take over raising me and the house and the cat. And getting me off to school and everything. And that's nothing, he'd ever done before. And again, this was 1973. So men were usually very involved in the household or raising the kids. Mm-hmm. That was a surprise for him.
Yeah. What were the things you've struggled with? Or was everything great?
No, it was not great to start. It wasn't terrible, but it wasn't great. Well, one of the challenges, of course, was that his wife and my mom had just died, so this was a very, very sad way to start having to get to know each other and create a life.
Yes.
And this was a time when people just kind of muddled through grief. You didn't think about it. You just went forward. So it's not like he took a lot of time off work. My mom died in mid-August. It wasn't, school was starting. So we were just kind of barreling through. Okay, how do we make dinner? How do we keep the house tidy? How do we take care of getting me off to school in the morning when he's kind of a nocturnal person and he never made a school lunch before? So he tried, he made meatloaf. We bought a lot of hamburger, meatloaf and broccoli, big bunches of broccoli. And, he tried, make sure I was out the door and all that. He just kind of took it over. We had lists of chores. I hadn't usually done that before, but suddenly we were doing laundry. We were doing this. Mm-hmm. My mom had been a stay-at-home mom. There was an after-school babysitter. And nothing was that bad, except that, we were both unhappy and we were impatient and we were dealing with a lot of new responsibilities right when we both lost the person who bound us together, my mom. So I think that was pretty hard.
Right. Of course, it's all new and, taking on, and like you said, we didn't deal with grief. We kind of just go through it, emotions, and it's all about surviving and creating this new schedule, new routine, regimen that allows you to kind of to thrive. What were some of the things that were great, that worked, that you loved?
Well, those happened a little later. At first we were both, I think, sad. He was sort of impatient raising a child. That wasn't something he was used to. I was very sad losing my mom and kind of feeling, well, at least I should get a dodgeball. A kid who just loses their mom shouldn't have a dodgeball thrown at him, or having, I wasn't very good at algebra that year, and I was like, well, it would have been nice to feel more validated. The great stuff probably happened maybe a year later because my dad and I started to really hit it off. A little later, he took classes in Buddhism and meditation, and he became much more patient. And he kind of learned how you talk to a kid. You know, you don't ask for everything, you just ask for one or two things.
Okay.
And we started to love cooking together. And we liked watching old British TV series. And, you know, we started to really form a friendship and we discovered we liked each other. And, you know, it was fun. He could help me with my math homework once I kind of got a little brain back. And I started baking. And so I think it was just kind of the things got fun a few years later, a couple
Mm-hmm.
years later, again, when we just sort of learned how to deal with each other and learned how to create a fun life together.
That's incredible. I love that.
Mm.
If you had an opportunity to go back in the past, what kind of advice would you give your younger self that immediately when your mom passed away and you were in that sad state and your dad, what would you tell her?
Well, for one thing, I tell her to be that it isn't her fault. You know, I think maybe when a kid loses a parent or a kid's divorced, you know, when parents are stressed, you think it's your fault, right? I mean, I remember that strongly. I was a little scattered. I did dumb things like forget my key, not do all the chores, not do my homework. And I would have told my younger self, hey, you lost your mom. Give yourself a break. But give your dad a break too. I would have said, you know, both of you are doing the best you can. Be gentle with each other. It's not going to be perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And I also would have told myself that I should have had more opportunities to get out of PE and algebra because I was a pretty sad kid for a bit. So I also would have said, speak up. You know, this isn't like losing a guppy and you're not malfunctioning. You get
Right.
to talk up if you're sad and you get to ask for things
Mm-hmm.
to be a little more gentle for you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what would you tell your dad when you were in that state? What would you want your dad to tell you during that time?
That I was a great kid and he loved me and I wasn't doing anything wrong. It was just a stressful time because suddenly we were taking on everything that my stay-at-home mom did. And she did it beautifully. You know, two dinners, one for me, one for him, the house perfect, the garden perfect, you know. I would have told him that you know, we're doing fine, but we need to give ourselves more of a break.
Right.
And if things are feeling stressful, maybe we need to pull back. You know,
Yeah.
I didn't want to repeat the fifth grade, but I could have used a few more personal days at that point.
Were you involved when your mom was still around in any of the activities like gardening or baking or cleaning or anything?
No,
So it
no,
was
I was
like
kind
a
of a
whole
daydream,
new territory for you.
entirely new territory. Yeah, I had very few chores. I think the cat litter box, and I wasn't even very good at that. So, yeah, suddenly it was like, well, somehow the dishes have to get done. The laundry has to get, you know, me or nothing. I mean, I had an after school sitter and we went through the chores, but
Mhm.
you know, suddenly it was the two of us.
Right,
That was
right.
real different.
Yeah. And what was it like in school? What was like dealing with peers? And I know it's many, many years ago, but
Oh yeah.
did you notice anything that you want to share?
Brain fog. I mean,
Brain
it,
fog.
you
Okay.
know, when you lose, I mean, something like that happens.
Mhm.
Obviously, your brain needs time. You know, I felt that with
Yeah.
my husband as well. I lost him.
Mhm.
You know, your brain isn't where it was. So I think, you know, if you have a kid who's stressed like that, they're not going to be at their sharpest. And
Mhm.
telling them to study harder doesn't work. Maybe you need to create a nurturing study environment or something. But you know, also, I mean, honestly, I know things are different than when I was a kid, but I don't think fifth grade shapes your entire life. You know, not acing fifth grade isn't going to kill anybody.
Yes, yes. What do you think, Heiko, you learned through your experiences of growing up in a single parent household?
I'm sorry, what were my experience?
What did you learn from your experience? Would you
Oh,
say, how did it change or prepare you for your adult life?
oh, well, it prepared me for my adult life very well because I had chores and things, and I had to sort of figure out, well, okay, these are the chores to get done. This is the homework. This is free time. You know, by the time I was a little older, I was the kind of kid who got their papers done ahead of time and could kind of organize homework and that type of thing. This was, yeah, at 10, I got very good training for law school, which I did when I was 23.
Oh.
Um, so I definitely learned kind of how to organize things. I also learned how to see my dad as a person,
Mhm.
not just a parent, not just like my mom, when I don't think I ever thought of her really as a person. I thought of her as someone who gives to me, as 10. I mean, I think that's normal.
Right.
But I really, started to see grown-ups and other people as people,
Mhm.
strengths and weaknesses,
Yeah.
um, just as people. So I think that helped a lot too.
Yeah. So it made you more kind of more confident, more organized, and
Yeah, confident with adult, not confident with kids. One of the things is I was a very shy child, so spending so much time with my dad and then other adults, I was the kind of kid that was afraid to talk to other kids, but when I talked to people, I had a really weird vocabulary. It was real big for a 10-year-old. I didn't talk like kids, and so I wasn't fitting in too well.
oh, what do you think is the most important trait to instill in a child?
Oh, self-worth and strength, self-worth and inner strength.
Mhm.
Because kid has to be able to stand up for themselves. When I was a child, I think we were raised to respect authority too much, and I like the way children today are being raised. Like, you don't have to hug the grown up, you have body autonomy. One woman I know is a single parent. Her like 8-year old or something dyed her hair pink, and it's not permanent, but what she said is, I want her to know it's her hair, it's her choice. If she doesn't want to hug Uncle Bob, she doesn't have to hug Uncle Bob. So, I think it's important to raise kids with a sense of self and
Mhm.
self-esteem, and that will help them through everything. I mean, my teachers weren't always right, and they didn't know how to deal with a grieving child.
Mhm.
I mean, nobody really did. So I think a little more self-esteem, a little self-worth. You stand up for yourself, and you can say, hey, I feel terrible, and know that people will still love you and that they'll listen to you.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's the most important thing. Not, I mean, grades are important, but that moment of emotions and self-esteem is what they're gonna carry out throughout their life. And fifth,
Exactly.
like you said, fifth grade, flunking fifth grade does not gonna deter your whole life.
Right. Yeah. I don't think it's the grades at all. I mean, and you can get steady habits at any time. Some kids get them later, some aren't that mature that way. But again, that's the other reason I think you kind of need the self-esteem for when someone, so that even as a child, you start to get a sense of instincts like, hey, this isn't right.
Mhm.
You know,
Mhm. Yeah.
I mean, there's all that saved me later when I was in a high school and the kids were partying, and I knew, no, that's not right for me. No, I don't want to go for a ride in that car with the boy. I mean, just kind of having a sense of, this isn't right for me.
Yeah. Yeah. What is your favorite memory with your dad growing up?
Um, Baking.
Mhm.
I love to bake.
Did you have a
And so
favorite recipe that you always did together?
I did it myself. So it was nice I just remember baking, and we used to do dinner parties together. So we baked. So probably my favorite two memories are making chocolate mousse, because my mom used to make it. And I was really happy at 13 to make it and just feel a piece of her, and to feel that I could do that. And
Right.
then I'd bake sugar cookies, and my dad would make bread. So Sunday would be baked goods fest. And that was
Oh,
nice.
nice, nice.
Yeah, I like that.
Any a trait that you wanted to emulate from your dad?
Um, well, I wish I had his brains. He's a genius. One of the things I like about him very much is, well, two things. You know how strong he was in his capacity for joy. So I really love that when he was faced with such a terrible challenge, being losing his wife while he had the big career, and inheriting a child that he never raised, he tried to find some joy in it. At first, it was just competence, being, figuring it out, but then we found some joy in it.
Mhm.
So I would very much want to have the strength to change and also to find joy in bad situations.
Yeah, I think it's important quality to have. Not let the circumstances of your life. uh, negatively determine the rest of your life, because
Exactly.
as they say, it's 20% what happens and 80% how we react to what happens. That because at every moment of now we create a future. So if we continue to, and of course there is time for processing of grief and loss, but how we take it forward and showing, like teaching you as his child, to embrace everything with grace as you go through life challenges. What kind of advice would you give to single parents raising kids?
Oh, that's hard. The world is so different today than when I was a child in 1973. I would say one thing is to feel confident. They probably do because there are more single parents, I think, today, and it's more normal for especially women to decide to have children on their own, which is fantastic. So obviously, you only really need one great parent to raise a child well. I don't feel that you really need to have a two-parent household. I mean, it's not realistic, and there's nothing to feel bad about. When my dad met a few women that he thought were good role models for me, he would put us together. He'd have them over for a dinner, or there'd be an opportunity for me to hang out with them so I could see women, independent career women,
Yeah.
which again probably was more important in the 70s. But I mean, very much that one parent who stands up for you, who's your advocate, who is strong for you, all you need.
Thank you. Yes, that's a great kind of encouragement for single parents who feel not enough, or who feel that they need two people to raise a proper child.
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't know.
What are some of the current projects that you're working on?
Well, I finished this book, so I want to start writing more about my father. As you can tell, he's my idol. And he had a very interesting career. He's a nuclear physicist. And he was, the first person in his family to go to college, not to mention get a PhD. And again, what it was like. My book deals with what it was like to be raised by a single parent. My book talks about what that was like for me. I'm very positive.
Yeah.
And I'd like to get a little more of his perspective, although he always says he loved it. He loved raising me. And so I want to write more about my dad. He's 92 and a half. So.
Oh, that's amazing. I love that. What an amazing project to work on. And if I called, is there anything I haven't asked that you would like to share?
I don't think so. No, I don't. I mean, as you can tell, I'm very positive about having been raised by a single parent. That's
good, because this podcast is not just to say, but talk about bad experiences, but what good things were there. What were the things that were working, that we should embrace, that we should practice more of.
Yeah. I mean, he listened to me. I could have any opinion. He didn't put it down. If I didn't like some grown-ups, he wasn't like, oh, they're right. It was like, oh, well, why? And he'd be like, oh, I could see that. I could see that was kind of rude when you did this or did that. So, I mean, really listening to your kid is valuable. And he was really validating of my feelings at a time when I don't think grown-ups were known to do that. But if I didn't like somebody, or I hated something, or I didn't want these kids, that's fine. You can have those feelings. Now we'll deal with them a little differently. But I felt very validated. And I think that might be something that is helpful, since it's just, a single parent with the kids. It's they're it. You don't have two parents to bounce things off of. So having my views taken very seriously, even though I was a child, was very good.
You felt appreciated and heard, and
yeah, I did. And that I could have any opinions if I didn't like this or I didn't like that. It's like food. You don't have to eat everything. You just have to taste things. You don't like it? Fine. You don't like these people? We won't have them over. I was probably a little overindulged, but
Right. Oh, I love it. That's incredible. Thank you. If people would like to connect with you or learn more about you, where would they go?
They go to my website, Debbie Weiss Author. That's the best place that has information on my book available as is. If they just want the book available as is, it's on Amazon, or you can get it at your local bookstore. But I'm there. I'm the best place again is my website, Debbie Weiss Author. But I'm also on Instagram, not surprisingly, as Debbie Weiss Author. And I check messages. So
Awesome.
I'm with Facebook.
And we'll include everything in episode notes. People can connect with you directly. Thank you so much for coming on, sharing your story, your wisdom, and your experiences.
Thank you. This is fun.